Hey guys, Max92, welcome to another tryout. Today's tryout is on Blasphemous.
Because it is my guilt, I claim your grievous miracle. Make my chest hurt with regret. Forge your punishment and nail it deep. Shape my guilt once again.
So like last week, I'm not really dressed up as anything because my options I feel here are either a full suit of armor or absolutely nothing and tied to a pole. And the first thing I don't have, and the second thing I probably shouldn't do, so no costume this week. Blasphemous is a Souls-like Metroidvania action platformer, whatever you want to call it, that's steeped in a bloodied rendition of Roman Catholic inspired iconography. It's a very visually cool game. There are like animations for certain enemies that are really cool. It's just visually, you know, the pixel art, it's very, very impressive. This is a game I got through Prime Gaming, and I had to play it through the Amazon Games launcher, and so I don't know if that affects my experience, but I feel like it's important to say. And I'm just finally getting around to actually trying it out. This is a game that I've sort of known about for a while, but I've never really looked that far into. I sort of know its inspirations. This seemed like a game that I would want to play with a controller other than a mouse keyboard, just because it's got like a decent amount of control. So I first picked out the Sega Genesis reproduction controller thing I have, the 6-button from Retrobit, which it's actually got 8 buttons and then start select. But this actually didn't have enough buttons on it. I needed like one more button to really play the game, or to get the button remapping to function. So instead of using that, I ended up using the Pro 2, which worked fine. It's weird because like this really has like the same amount of buttons. I mean, I guess it's got your stick clicks, but like it's basically the same amount of buttons. But I got it to work on here fine. This just kind of comes up as a Xbox controller when you have it set to X input mode, I think it is. I just felt like bringing up my issues with getting a controller to function when I started out, because it took me a little bit. It took me like 20 minutes, I think, to get a controller situation figured out. But after I got the controller situation figured out, the game played really well. It plays very nicely using a D-pad or a thumbstick. It's overall pretty satisfying to play, and as I mentioned with the aesthetic, the whole vibe, it's very compelling. It really gets you into that world and that like aesthetic, and it's really so well steeped in all of that it pulls you in as well, and you're like, oh, this is interesting. I gotta see, you know, how this all works and get to the bottom of all of this imagery and what does it symbolize, you know, that kind of stuff. I played for like 2 hours or so, and there's one boss that you fight like at the very beginning that I beat on a first try, and then there was another boss that I beat a little later on that took me a handful of tries, but I eventually got through them. So I've only done like a little bit of the game. I've explored a handful of areas just to sort of get a feel for how the game plays, you know, to feel for the combat and how satisfying the combat is, and it's all very solid. There's two things I want to bring up as like sort of negatives, and the first of which is that jumping and grabbing ledges or grabbing ladders in midair seems like it can be a little inconsistent. There were definitely times where I jumped and tried to grab onto this ladder and it didn't seem to work, and so it's like, oh, I guess I'm not supposed to go there. That happened at least once, and then I had to come back and I was like, oh, this is a place I'm able to go. It just wasn't doing the thing the way that it thought, you know, the way that it seemed to have been supposed to. So it's like, it seems like that can be at least something that has to be more precise than it seems sometimes, or it's just inconsistent. I can't really put my finger on exactly what the issue is there, but it's something that I noticed playing. And the other thing that I noticed, and this might be just me not going far enough into some rooms when I like find multiple pathways or whatever, but it seems like the spacing of your like save points, your bonfire equivalents, as this is like a Souls-like platformer. It can be a bit inconsistent. Typically in these kinds of games, there's like an amount of space you sort of expect between each of your bonfire equivalents, and that gets set up early on, and like it generally stays a similar amount of space. But for this one, it just feels a bit inconsistent about the spacing, which leads to like weird pacing in your gameplay. It seems inconsistent. That's really what I'm trying to say. But I don't think those two things really detract from the experience. I think this game is very solid, visually compelling. I don't want to say pleasant because of the sort of subject matter, but it's very visually compelling and very cool. So I like the game. I want to play more of it. I think I'd recommend it to most people. So if you've been around and you've seen the show before, you know what that means. It means this game passes tryout. That's really all I have to say about the game, though. So we're going to get directly into the end bits here. If you go down the description, you find a beacons.ai link that'll take you to places like my Twitter, Patreon, Bandcamp, Redbubble. Links to those things will be in that link. So you can click on that, go to those places, do what you do there. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you didn't. Subscribe to keep with this and other shows. I do all sorts of things on the channel. Leave a comment. Have you played Blasphemous? Have you played any other games in this sort of like Souls-like Metroidvania-ish area? Leave a comment. Share the video. Do things. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.